What kind of dog do you have?
He's definitely a pit bull and mixed with something else. Yeah, I rescued him. So
Oh, yeah?
I never did one of like those genetic testing things.
How long have you had the pit bull?
2019, November 2019. So I got him before like everybody started getting COVID dogs.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
so before it was like one
Is
of
he
those.
awesome?
He's awesome. He's like part like snake / kangaroo / like he's also like skin to skin. Like if you're on the couch, it can be 9 feet of the couch left. He's just gonna come right here.
Yeah.
He's one of those.
What's his name?
Kilo.
That's a cool name. How did you come up with that name?
Well, everybody thinks like kilo as in like
Weight.
kilogram weight. That's actually just the phonetic K when we're saying it in the military. If we're pronouncing K, if we're saying K, we don't say the letter, we say kilo.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah, so I tried to make it military-ish
okay,
without
okay.
it sounding too like patriotic.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
So kilo's that.
Yeah. I try not to judge people. I try not to have prejudices or prejudgments, and I do a decent job. One place I just can't get around is if you're a cat person, not a dog person, go to hell.
I'm confused by that. I'm honestly confused by the cat people who aren't dog people.
Yeah.
It's also like how do you trust a cat at night?
Yeah. What are you doing with the cat? Also, they're not, So yeah, I love me and my brother. We lived together, obviously in high school, but then in college and medical school and residency. We lived together at least at some point during every step, and so we had dogs, and we had a pit bull named Giselle
Okay.
for about a year and a half. But she was a little too crazy. We had her. We were living in Manhattan, and in Manhattan, like here, if I go for a walk in the suburbs, like with the German Shepherds, they're pretty aggressive. The ones I have, I could show you them. They're really aggressive, but nobody's around me.
Yeah.
For the most part. But in Manhattan,
Yeah.
like if you have like an aggressive dog in Manhattan, you can't get through past the block.
Yeah, you can't walk on the sidewalk.
We ended up
can't do anything.
giving her to some friends. So we had a pit bull. We had a Rottweiler in school. That's cool. Now, Buddy's half poodle. If you told me back when that I would have had a poodle, I'd have been like, but he's the best.
Yeah.
He's half poodle, half Bernese.
Something
Half poodle. Labradoodle, something like that.
Yeah.
But he's great. He's the best. All right. Well, by the way, awesome song.
Thank you.
Are you keeping up with all that stuff?
I am keeping up with it, but like that song just rings off. It's like so catchy. You can't not bop your head to that.
Kendrick is so good. So is this our first repeat guest?
Yeah,
I was thinking about that when I was coming down.
first one.
That's first one, right? And
Yep.
how many of these have we done? Like
3.
lot.
This is the 3rd one technically, because we did one at Paramus, and then we did
Buddy, chill.
And then we did the one at Phoenix. So this.
Oh, third. Yeah, I forgot Paramus. I remember Phoenix.
Yeah.
Paramus was before that even.
Paramus
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
When we first
Mo with
opened.
the laptop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. So it's three-peat.
Yep.
Well, there's nobody who deserves it more. I consider Dave and Phoenix part of Baker Health, actually. I think I'd like you still to just talk a little bit about your background for those who haven't like heard you before, seen you before. But I think the reason I think it's appropriate to have Dave on multiple times, we try to do, and the members that are watching or that come to us know, we try to do everything that doctors' offices don't, right? So some of that stuff is more easy logistical stuff, like no wait times, no phone calls, leveraging technology, doing stuff like this, like melding social media. Like I've gotten to the point where I consider social media part of the healthcare delivery system. That's how I look at it, because I was giving a talk. I don't know, Mohammed, you weren't with me. I was giving a talk, and the #1 New York Times bestseller today is written by a guy. His name is Dr. John Haidt. You don't have any kids?
No.
Okay. His name is Dr. John Haidt. He's a NYU psychologist. I've already had some of his books in our office for people to read. That's how highly I think of him. This book is the #1 New York Times bestseller. It's called it's like The Anxious American Child, something like that. Don't quote me, but something like that. New York Times bestseller, and it's about how social media is like obliterating teenagers' minds. Okay, so when you think about the #1 problem we have is mental health, and then the #1 contributor, at least for kids and probably for adults on some level, is the social media stuff, which has a lot of good but has a ton of bad. I think to embrace social media on a positive note is part of the healthcare delivery system. And I haven't heard anybody say that or think of it that way. And I'm starting to think of it that way. And so we do this. I consider these talks with guys like you, experts in different avenues of healthcare, to be a form of healthcare delivery. I actually do.
Yeah.
And so we try to do all these different things. But I think, one of the coolest things we've done differently, we've been able to execute on, is our partnership with Fenix. And I don't know, I think we've had over 100 members come through with you guys. And what we've seen with the folks that have come through is they come back after they've gone to you guys for the consultation with like a different view on fitness. And I'm going to use words that I think aren't the right words. Like, I'll say fitness because I'm more ignorant than you in it. But what happens is any of our members get a free consultation with Fenix, Dave's gym. And it's not, again, gym is not the right word, but it's a concierge kind of boutique, one-on-one type fitness program. And I've used it. Family members of mine used it. My wife, my sister-in-law have used it. Love it. And in that consultation, they get the stuff you get with like a personal trainer, but that's kind of where it starts. And then you go beyond in terms of nutrition, lifestyle, and then there's a report and there's quantitative data. The members we've sent to you guys, the feedback I get and the impact on their life is not equivocal to when I send them to a cardiologist or ENT. It's beyond that. And so again, in terms of our attempts to reframe healthcare delivery, whether it's social media or partnerships like we have with you, I think this is one of the most successful examples that I've seen. And so I'm proud to have you on. I'm proud to call you a friend. I'm proud to call you a business partner. And I think like a lot of what we want to do going forward is going to have more and more to do with stuff you're innovating on. And so I'd love to hear more about that tonight. But with that, if you could just talk a little bit about your background and your journey, and then what brought you, how you came up with Fenix and what it is.
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, thank you again for being on again. Third time, three-peat, But yeah, a little bit about my background. I think I wasn't actually destined to do fitness, right? I think there's a certain level of me that inherently is like a coach and a leader. I did that a lot in sports. I kind of like assumed that role coming up through high school. But I didn't take the normal trajectory after high school. And I tend to say like college is the best thing that never happened to me after high school, because my journey was the military after high school. So.
And where'd you grow up around here?
Bergenfield. So I graduated in Bergenfield. And unfortunately, I had a ACL injury my senior year in football. So I ended up missing my senior wrestling season, which was like my sport. Wrestling was my sport, and where I thought I would compete at the next level, whether it's D2, D3. But it was something that I was passionate about enough to say, hey, I'll do this at the next level. Unfortunately, that, again, sidetracked me and sidelined me. And I was just looking for another purpose. And that other purpose happened to be the military. And I had family members in the military at the time, the Marine Corps, the Army, I think the Air Force as well, but no one in the Navy. And then the Coast Guard is like Department of like Homeland Security, so not really the military. So it's like, so the Navy was my pursuit, my goal. And my sister, my older sister, she's definitely influenced me in some way. She's a nurse, and I was like in high school not doing well in medical terminology, right? But somehow, some way, I was like, I want a medical job, right? So my job and my title is hospital corpsman in the Navy. And that was the school in which I was contracted to kind of go into, which is basically a medic in the Navy, right? So if you think Army and medics, the hospital corpsman, and the hospital corps is the robust medical personnel of the Navy. What I didn't know at the time, and this is why, you definitely need to read through the fine print if you're going to the military or have somebody going to the military that you know. I didn't know that I was contracted to go to the Marine Corps or just be like augmented to the Marine Corps afterwards. My contract came with like a nice signing bonus. This is 2008, the peak of people going back into war and combat environments. But mine came with a signing bonus. I thought no catch, but we're finishing about boot camp, and then you go back to what this called a detailer, and they're like, yeah, so upon like graduation, you go to this school, and then when you finish that school, you go to this school, and then you'll be with the Marines. And I said, oh, like I think you got this mixed up. I think you got the wrong person. They're like, nope, says it right here. You signed right here. So I was a little bit like scared and nervous at first when I was like, man, like thinking about going, like I got to join the Marines and not join them physically, but have to serve alongside them. That's a little scary, especially when you're not really competent in your job or confident in your skills yet, because I hadn't gone through the school. But fast forward to 2000, at the end of 2008, 2009, I go through my hospital corps school. I do really well in that school. By the way, I was like telling my mom, I was like, if I studied this hard in high school, National Honor Society, like no easy cakewalk, because that school actually has a a pretty high attrition rate. So I mean, but that's your job while you're there, and failure technically is not an option. So I excelled really well at that, and with time, it builds confidence and competence in what you do from a medical standpoint. Then I went to California and went into another school, which kind of integrates you with what you do from like Navy medicine and teaches you a lot more about combat medicine and what the Marines do, their way of life, their history, and why so important, why your role is so important to the operating forces of the Marine Corps. Because it's basically you and a bunch of Marines, and you are their first echelon of care, right? So whether it's a paper cut or a bruise, or a gunshot wound, or amputation, right? You have to learn how to deal with that stuff, train with them, force multiply yourself in many ways and teach them what to do until you get there, or until you can arrive on the scene, and so on and so forth. So I went through that school in 2009, learned a lot more about the Marine Corps way of life. And again, just adding reps to like my skill set from the medical side. So I felt very confident, upon graduating that school. I felt very proud about what I was doing at that point as well. So 2009, 2010, I'm back home, right? And adjusting to civilian life, even though I hadn't deployed at that point, was very, very like challenging, because I was like, man, life is happening so slow. These people are not disciplined enough, right? Like I was so already conditioned to that way of life. So I volunteered to deploy. I definitely didn't want to miss the show. I didn't want to play on the sidelines. I wanted to definitely use my skill set. And I felt good enough, like confident, right? I was like, I'm going to volunteer. So my top 3 choices at that time was, Iraq, Afghanistan, Horn of Africa. And 2 weeks later, I'm getting a call from like one of the chiefs that do mobilizations. They're like, hey, we got a unit that's leaving in 2 months. And I was like, good to go. Sign me up for that. And I kind of like answered that before I even like told my mom, told my girlfriend at the time, told my employer. I was like, just whatever I need to do, just sign me up. And then, you kind of go through that process and get yourself ready and squared away. But 2010 to 2011, deployed to Afghanistan. I call it spring break 2011, spent out there in the desert. So through deployment, we see our fair share of things. There are some people that definitely experience less, and then there's definitely people that experience more. My experience was my experience. It was very kinetic in a way, so we did definitely see a lot of combat, some stuff on the ground, things that you definitely see in movies. But again, with confidence and competence in your job and your skill set, you kind of fall back on your skills and your training. So I kind of obviously made it back from there. And I was like, what am I going to do next? And I definitely wanted to continue in medicine, but I didn't know necessarily what I was going to do. Remember, I went right after high school to the military. So my goal was to be a PA, physician assistant. And I was like, I can stay operating in the Marine Corps, or operating at least in the military, meaning like I can be on the front lines and still have that medical training. Typically, when you get something deeper than that, like nurse practitioner, or even like become an MD, we like to say you're in the rear with the gear, right? Like you're in the back at the trauma unit or stuff like that. You're not really on the front lines. So PA was going to be the route that I was going to choose. So went through school, bio degree, getting ready to apply. But for anybody who's ever done any kind of science degree or science major, you realize that your life is really sucked out of you between the weight of the classes, then your labs, and then all that fun jazz in between. So couldn't really work. Fitness was one of those things that I could do and that I liked and I enjoyed. So I got into fitness, group fitness, eventually like CrossFit, and then personal training. And then I was just happened to be in a good environment, I would say, where I got to meet a lot of great and amazing people, successful people, just very forward thinkers, and almost a community that I've never been exposed to, and help them solve problems that they basically didn't have the skill set to. So they were successful in certain aspects of their life, but from weight loss or to fitness, they were clueless, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to, take this, person and this successful person and take them through this transformation of either losing weight or changing their family trajectory, basically setting a good example for their wife, their kids, their parents, and having people come in. It caught a lot of traction, but then it also gave me the same gratification practicing medicine did, right? Trauma is an interesting thing when you're in the battlefield space, or even if in a trauma unit. It's a lot more instant gratification, right? Because you can sometimes see a lot of the things that you need to treat. There's some signs and symptoms of other things that you probably have to, assess and analyze on the fly, but it's very high speed. And then with that comes a lot of gratification. Like, I've just sealed the deal on this thing or solved this problem. I got the same gratification with helping people, right? Watching people change their life around, from a weight loss standpoint, or, having their family start to work out and their friends start to come in because of their transformations. And it just became a ripple effect. And I did fall in love with the process of fitness because of that. But more importantly, I fell in love with like the business side. I was like, oh, wow, like you can actually do this for a career and you can actually impact people's lives. So I decided to go all in on fitness. I was like, I graduated my bio degree back in 2016, 17. And I was like, worst comes to worst, I'll go back active duty, right? And it was like a fallback plan, but not really. And ever since then, just never looked back. Got to build some amazing relationships, amazing partnerships, right? And network my way into rooms that I didn't think I could. And all by way of just helping people become better, right? And it's just something that has always meant something to me. And I think being able to instill that change and have people see the things that they already possess just come to the surface in something that they believe that wasn't possible for themselves, whether it's losing weight or working out 3 times a week or getting their parents to work out. It's like, man, you've always possessed that. So let's figure out how to bring it to the surface for you. So fast forward, I'm just kind of going through my like wanting to build, wanting to create solutions, wanting to solve problems. Fenix comes along, right? This idea of Fenix and personal training specific gym, but really putting the trainers forward, right? They are essentially the clientele of the facility, right? They are the clientele of the business. And if you take care of them, the client interaction will take care of itself. The client experience will excel at a high level. And for us, that's important to continue to do, to really put the personal trainer and the professional on the front lines of that experience. And I believe that it is the bridge between fitness. I mean, fitness is the bridge between healthcare, and making sure that we can get positive results and change the trajectory and what the narrative has been over the past 10, 15, 20 plus years of like not being prescribed movement, not being prescribed fitness, right? And understanding the impact that can from a mental health standpoint, from a physical health standpoint, and why we are all better doing something kind of like similar. So that's where Fenix kind of came about. And we opened 3 weeks before COVID. So February 2020, Fenix is born. And then March 16th, when the world shut down. So we had a long waiting period after that. But we're surrounded by a great community. We have a great team, great community. And we were able to kind of pull ourselves out of it. So we're excited to look forward to the future. We're excited, obviously, with our partnership with you. And to do more things like this, right? Because I definitely know it's forward thinking and it puts trainers in a position to solve big, big, big problems. And that's what like fires me up as well. I love working with clients. I love watching people do their first push up, first pull up, first squat. But then I love watching professionals grow. I love watching people solve problems. So it's super important, super inspiring, and it kind of keeps me going.
That's awesome. I think tonight one of the things that we're going to talk about, you mentioned like the business aspect of fitness.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people are curious about. We have a lot of members that are personal trainers, that are nutritionists, that work in a gym, work for a gym, own a gym. We have a lot of those members, right? They come in, and I think it's a big field that's growing, right? Because of the awareness. And so I want to get to that.
Of course.
But before I do, you said a few things that I'd like to pick out that like piqued my curiosity. I'm sure a lot of the people watching find it interesting too. And I'd like some elaborate. First of all, the term, I never heard someone use that term. I'm going to steal it from you. I loved it. You were saying, I forget how you said it. You're like, and then multiply myself.
Force multiply.
Force multiply. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I never heard that before. Is that like a military term?
Well, we definitely say it in the military because with respect to my job, again, it could be me and it could be 30 Marines, 40 Marines, right? in the unit per se, or stepping off on a mission potentially. It could be me and 5 Marines, right? Depending on like the unit that I'm with. And the reality of the situation, the best battlefield medicine is fire superiority. So meaning like even though somebody might be hurt and somebody might be down, the first thing to do is return fire or make sure everything is rounds going down range, right? So it might be some time before I get on scene. It might be some time before I get to that Marine that might be 150 meters away, right? Like people don't realize that because of the movies. Everybody looks stacked up on doors and they're moving through urban terrain and they're like, oh, okay, like personnel is right there. But in reality, especially sometimes in the desert, right, there's nothing there, right? And, you step off on IED or you get a, small arms attack and you got to take cover or something like that. You might have to run 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters to get to the person that's down, right? So force multiply is just like, can I teach these guys some basic life-saving interventions? So this way, when I get on scene, like I can do the rest, right? Potentially. Or in the event that I go down, right? And can some of these guys save me. So it is important to train these guys as best you can, train these guys to the level in which you believe that they can learn some of this stuff. So we do we pick out what's called combat lifesavers. So those guys are trained at a higher level than just the basic level. And again, it's just really to just kind of scale yourself in many ways because you don't, some of these times you're just in environments and without, help, right? And you need to kind of create as much of the best case scenario as possible. And it's self-aid, buddy aid, then corpsman aid, right? Yeah. So then I'm like third on the list, right, in theory. But force multiply is definitely a term that I haven't heard outside the military.
That's a cool term and concept. And I want to ask you also about the military experience. So I never served at all. Sometimes I think it's a regret. Sometimes I even toil. A lot of countries in the world, military duty is mandatory. Mm-hmm. And United States, it's not. We had a draft. It's not. Sometimes I wonder the pros and cons of having that because of, there's no question in my mind that people who serve have a unique and frankly better perspective on the world in some way, meaning they're always more reticent when you talk about violence, whether it's actually going to war or any form of violence. I think when you've seen something like that, you have a unique respect for it, right? Whereas the guys who just kind of see it, like you said, on movies and stuff, they'll just talk about like war, like whatever. So I think there's a respect that's almost necessary that only comes among many other things, some of which you talked about. So the one I want to ask you, you said you went in the beginning, you came out, and then the lack of discipline and it's too slow, and that kind of pulled you back in.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from afar, everybody kind of knows that there's a like a very unique level of discipline in the military, but can you talk a little bit about kind of what discipline you had or didn't, and then that you gained, and then specifically about discipline and what it's meant for you in your life? Because one of the, as a pediatrician, the word discipline, I think sometimes has a negative connotation when you talk about kids. They're like, oh, they discipline their kids. When I grew up, disciplining your kid was the first thing a parent was supposed to do. And somewhere along the line that got lost. I still think it's a very important part of parenting. But you can't do that if you don't discipline yourself.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about the concept of discipline? It's something people don't talk about. And I know you personally, so I know that it's helped you a lot, but just expound on it a bit.
Yeah. So in recent years, I've been kind of like trying to not necessarily water it down, but put it into a different term that isn't so, I guess make people feel a little bit more
negative
attacked.
connotation.
Yeah. And that is really standard, right? Like if people say you have discipline, it's like you have a standard, whatever that standard may be, right? You're so disciplined that you run at 4 o'clock in the morning. No, I have a standard that I do that, right? Same thing with your kids, right? Like they discipline their kids. No, they hold their kids to a certain standard.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So when it comes to discipline, I think like, what are those standards that you have, right? Are you negotiating with yourself on some of your standards, right? Are you just being complacent about what your standards should be? So with respect to me, it's like, that's what I essentially try to do. Like the things that I care about or the things that I believe are important or the things that will move the needle, I need to create standards, because if you don't have standards around those things, then you're just doing a lot of nothing, right? Or you'll fill your time with things that really drain your energy or drain your focus, right? If you don't have standards around how you use your phone, how you use social media, well, guess what you're going to do? You're going to be on your phone. You're going to be on YouTube. You're going to be on social media and TikTok, stuff like that. So important for me is to always reflect on those things that are important, right? My fitness, my nutrition, now my recovery, as I'm learning more about that. Those things are important. My relationships with people, the stuff that I need to do in my business, those are standards that need to be done, right? People have those, right? You just have to find out where they are in your life. And it's interesting when I have conversations with, anybody, right? You can be successful, you could be not. You can be trying to figure out your life. You are disciplined to the bad habits as well, right? Your standard is literally the bad habit that you want to get off of.
I consistently meet my standard of being on TikTok forever, or I consistently meet my standard of eating crap every night. Yeah.
And so there's another saying, like, you don't rise to the occasion, you fail to your level of training, right? And your training is a direct product of the standards that you enforce for yourself, potentially for others, so on and so forth, right? So if you aren't training yourself or holding yourself to a high standard continuously, well, guess what? Like in the event of, or with temptation, or when given the opportunity to take the path of least resistance, guess what you're going to do, right? So obviously in the military, it's a little bit more high risk, right? People to your left, people to your right are counting on you to have high standards. Hold yourself to a standard because their life depends on it. And they potentially think the same way, right? Like this guy and this girl, their life depends on my ability to stay awake on watch, just not fall asleep at this gun, right? Like, or be attentive when I need to be attentive, right? Or communicate clearly when I need to, right? So when they break it down Barney style in boot camp and they're like, your handwriting is shit, or like your uniform looks jacked up, it's because your standards are piss poor. And you can extrapolate on that. Yeah, that's not a combat environment, but if you are lackadaisical about this thing,
you play like you practice.
How can we ever trust you with that thing, right? Like, how can we trust you with, $70 million pieces of equipment, right? Or the lives of 40 or 60 or 100 men, right? Like, these are big, big deals. So when I came home, again, I was very motivated. If you meet anybody who comes and graduates boot camp and goes through their, primary, school and training, like they're motivated. They'll run, the patriotism is like running through your veins, right? You're ready to run your head through a wall. So when I get home, I'm like motivated. I'm like, man, like I got to upkeep my runs. I got to upkeep my fitness. I'm like, these civilians don't get it, right? Like I'm having road rage. I hadn't been anywhere yet, right? Like, so my standards for myself was just a little bit different. Now, that's what I call, or what I believe was motivation at the time. I'm like, I'm just motivated to use this skill set that I've learned and that I've trained for, right? Like, I don't think anybody wants to build on their career or build on their life and learn this skill set and never use it, right? Whether you're in finance, whether you're practicing law or even medicine, like you don't ever want to go to school and just be like, all right, cool, I'm glad I had that experience. Like when you're ready for somebody to call your jersey, right? And just pick you and say you're in the game. So I came home and I was just like, what am I doing? Like, am I going to go to school right away? Am I not? Am I going to work? Am I going to try and like transition into like a civilian life? And then honestly, I was like, that shit is boring, right? Like, it's boring for now, not boring like in life, obviously, but like just boring for where I was and where my motivation was. So my standards and my discipline was the thing that continued to like push me to say, let's volunteer for this. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. And, if you feel confident, you feel confident in your skills. I felt like I was the best suited for the job, whatever the job happened to be at that time. They could have called me and said, hey, we don't have anything overseas, but hey, we got something in Virginia. I would have been like, okay, great. At least I'm surrounded by more military personnel or people who are wearing the uniform that hold themselves to a standard, so on and so forth. So it was important for me to kind of like get that out of my system, and experience that more or less.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I'll say one comment and then I want to get to the business aspect of what you do.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, a lot of people are curious and you have a very unique approach for your business model. When I was listening to you talk about discipline and in many, many ways, I think like many people, I'm undisciplined. And then in many ways I have discipline, right? I think a lot of people have that. And like you said, what you want to do is try to match it up where you're disciplined in the things that are important, your priorities. So that input of discipline produces the outputs that you want. right? And I'd say I'd probably bat like 500 on that, right? But the one thing I can say, it's funny, it's interesting. You talk about discipline. Even I'm a big believer. I'm a very big believer in old school hard work.
Mhm.
I'm one of those guys that like you can, I, like works like when someone says work smart, not hard. I laugh inside, and I know I'm wrong, and they're probably smarter than me. Just the way I was raised, like immigrant parents, you just scrub the floors, clean the toilets, and then you go from there, kind of thing. So hard work. I think being intelligent gives you competitive advantage. I think you mentioned networking. I think having emotional quotient, high, knowing how to work with people is one of the most underrated things out there. That like they should have more courses, any courses in school on how to be likable and how to connect with people because that'll get you a lot of wins in this world, a lot of wins. But all these attributes, intelligence, hard work, EQ, whatever it is, when I look at the things that I've wanted to, the outputs I've wanted in my life that I have gotten, and the outputs that I've wanted that I have not gotten, the one thing that was there and the one thing that has been missing when I didn't get it was discipline.
Mm.
And so I think hard work, intelligence, emotional, all that stuff helps, accelerates, or enables. But actually, if I had to pick one thing, it's discipline or consistency.
Mhm.
Like if you want to get in shape, right? If you're smart and you figured out like a hack on how to do sit-ups, that like the 30-minute sit-ups that the dumb guy there does, you could do in 15, fine. That cut it, right? 15 minutes. But if the dumb guy is doing 30 minutes 5 days a week for 6 months and you're smart and you can do it like you ever read there's a book by this awesome podcaster, Tim Ferriss, it's called The 4 Hour
Work week.
and he has something about working out and he's in shape. He was a wrestler in college. Great. One of the best podcasts. I love listening to him. I don't know. It sounds like you listen to him. So hacks on how to do things work smarter, right? But still you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to the key is consistent doing of whatever it is. And you talk about like, okay, I'm really good at connecting with people. Great. That's great. You're really good at connecting with people, but you have to be consistent in putting yourself in those opportunities, in those contexts. And so actually the least sexy attribute, people are like, oh, is he really smart? Is she really hardworking? Does he know a lot of people? Those things are helpful, but actually it's discipline, which is consistency that's necessary. And I actually can look through my life and say, as a dad, as a husband, as a business owner, as a physician, as whatever, when I look at where I've hit and where I haven't, the only thing that the through line through all of it is where I've been disciplined. I've met my goals. Where I have not been disciplined or had standards or been consistent, I haven't.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't think people think about it enough or talk about it. I think they look for hacks.
Yeah, they definitely need hacks. Not need hacks. They look for hacks. But this is one thing, especially, I do a lot of question asking, right? Because especially in my space, there's a version in which people want to talk, right? I need to tell you how smart I am, how much lingo I know.
What do you mean when you're working with
as
them?
as a coach, right? You always want to communicate and show how smart you are, or not smart you are, but
you mean trainer to the client or client to the trainer or both?
Both,
Yeah.
right? And I'll get into it. It's like because
I didn't shut up when you trained me just because I don't want you to keep pushing me. I'm like, let me talk my way out of it so it's not more push-ups.
It's like you have to be searching for a solution, and sometimes in the role that we play, we want to hurry up and give that person the solution, right? As opposed to listen to wherever they may be, or like hear that one nugget and that one nuance that might be the gateway to helping them in a different way, right? Because they've always been trying. And I would even regress a little bit more before we even get to discipline. People need less, they don't need more information. They just need more action, right? And I know people know that, they just avoid it.
That's right.
And the reason why I know that is because I always ask this question for a lot of people who feel like they don't know what to do. I say, hey, what happens if somebody, your best friend, came to you with the same problem you have? What would you say to them? And some people, with respect to fitness or with respect to nutrition, they'll give their best thoughts on that. Hey, you should probably cut carbs, or you should probably exercise more. It could be as generic and or incorrect as possible. But guess what it is? It's an action, right? Most people sit back on the sidelines and don't take the action. So they'll wonder if that person's, disciplined, or if that person, is motivated, and all these other things. But guess what that person is doing at the bare minimum, whether they're doing it right or wrong? They're just taking action, right? And you won't know, and you won't be able to discern the difference if you're sitting still all the time. And that comes true with like opportunity. You won't know what's really an opportunity, and opportunity is not just going to come to you. You got to be a moving target essentially with that. So I think a lot of people sometimes they fall into this realm with respect to discipline or with respect to the standards that they want to create as they overcomplicate the shit out of it.
Yep.
You have to take one action, whether that's putting your shoes on and walking to eventually start running, whether that's signing up for a gym to eventually start working out, whether that's picking a workout buddy just so they can drag your ass to the gym, right? Like just take some action as opposed to overanalyze because you already know what to do. Like we have these phones in our pockets. We got AI now.
Yeah.
You don't need more information.
Yeah.
You need action. The action will help you understand what should I be more disciplined in? Where should I trim the fat? Where should I do something differently? Maybe I consult with someone else who's a professional because I really got myself to as far as I could, or at least at what my action could allow. And then we start to, take different steps and different measures, but you wouldn't have never gotten there if you didn't take one action.
Yeah.
And I believe most people just need to take that action and stop sitting on their hands.
You're exactly right. Even it's the same because we have very similar professions, right? We're there to help people improve their health. It's very similar. Many times when someone comes in and the parents are like, Dr. Baker, Samantha doesn't ... She won't sleep through the night ... She only eats junk ... Now, like doing this for over 15 years, before I give a lecture, I'm like, I grab the marker and I start writing I just look at them. I'm like, what I'm about to tell you. She's not her sleep training has nothing to do with her. It's you. Don't get pissed that she's eating Doritos. She's 6 years old. She doesn't have a car or job.
She didn't buy the Doritos.
She's not eating Doritos.
Yep.
You gave her Doritos,
Yep,
mother.
yep.
So you're so right that actually the majority of things, this is actually like a dirty secret because it'll put me and you both out of business. Like most people who come to us for stuff know the answer.
Yeah.
But you're right. You self-sabotage, you cloud it. And I think the people who are able to step back and be objective, and I like the way you said it. It's like whatever issue you're dealing with, personal health, business, whatever it is, try to put that problem in a sentence, make it one sentence and say, what if your friend came to you and asked this question? How would you answer your friend?
Yep.
Right? Because what that does is it strips out all your personal turmoil and angst that's confounding and clouding the situation and making you not see what's usually a very obvious answer.
Yep.
And so I love that. And then one last thing about the what's up? Oh, sorry. One last thing about the index, about the action. Do you remember I said this story about I had lunch with a good friend of mine who actually has his company was bought by another company, and I find myself at a lunch with a billionaire. This guy is a billionaire who has bought companies that you and I know, that are famous companies. And I'm there because of my friend, just helping him out, supporting him / celebrating. Did I tell you the story about when I asked him, I was so fascinated by this guy, the companies that he's on. And I asked him one question about founders. Were you there when I was talking about this, about what's the number one attribute? I was talking to you, Fatin. I thought it was you, Fatin. I said, what's the number one?
I think it was last Friday.
Yeah.
With Sam was there too.
Yeah. That's right. So to your point, I asked him, I'm like, listen, so this company X, which if I said it, you'd know it. That's a really cool company. I've gone to their store, right? Or my wife has gone to this. I don't know who you don't know who's the founder of these companies, but this guy bought these companies and scaled them. And I was just curious, what's the number? Because every founder is different. You're a founder, I'm a founder, right? You started your company. Me and my brother started this together. What is the number one attribute across all of them? This one of them is actually he has two fitness companies. Actually, the guy who bought this company,
He wants a third.
The third company. So there's two fitness companies. Yeah, exactly. The two fitness. The one that my friend sent him is like a technology thing, unrelated. And so he said the biggest thing that I see is they all have I forget how he phrased it, an index or a propensity. Oh, they all have a bias towards action. Do you remember I said this to you? I told these guys a story because I was so excited. And I was like, what do you mean a bias to action? Because I was waiting for something they freaking all went to Harvard, or they all like, I don't know, are very physically fit because they're something like that. He said they all have a bias towards action. Remember? And so I go, what do you mean exactly? I kind of know what you mean, but it's exactly what you said. He goes, what I mean is they might have some good ideas and some bad ideas, and they're building the business, and they're like, why don't we do this? Why don't we not do this? He's like, the world is full of people with great ideas. There's no shortage of great ideas, right? Even like what Muhammad and me and my brother and like Fatin and Jenny and what the team is doing. It's not genius to be like, wait times suck, get rid of them. Phones suck, just allow direct access. These are not like anybody can think of this, but it's like, okay, stop talking and put it, let's go. Like, what do we do? How do we do? How do we make sure that we respond to messages from our members within 60 seconds? How do we make sure that we guarantee same day appointments? How do we make sure? And we spend a lot more time doing, iterating. Iterating is a fancy way to say screwing up and fixing, but I'll say iterating and doing it. And all of a sudden, because everybody else is talking about all the problems in healthcare, and only a few are just jumping in and being like, get out of my way, move, we're fixing it. While they're all having meetings and focus groups and huddles and team meetings and blah, blah, blah. We're just doing. And actually, there's a lot of guys that are a lot smarter than us with a lot of really thick slides and PowerPoints on what workflow should be that haven't done shit. And no, but it's true. Yeah. And all we do is we do it. And like members love the vitamin infusions, but they didn't love the first version of our IV hydration. The members,
the first version of that.
The first version of the app, right? It was more complaints. Now every member is addicted to the app, right? So, exactly. Or remember we did prenatal classes in person. Now the world's changed. So they want like digital. So you just do it and you iterate and you end up improving. Instead, you could sit forever and just think of ideas. And so even like you said, just lace them up, just start, just go towards action. So I think exactly what you said applies across the board. And I think that's a good segue. I know we have a few questions, but I do want to make sure, Dave, fitness is a big field. There's a lot of people that watch or listen that are in fitness and health. Can you talk a little bit about how you entered, personal training and gyms are not new, but your approach to it from a business model standpoint is very unique. I've never actually seen it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the how and why?
Yeah. So if we think about fitness in general, it's a very, 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 I can keep going with the varies, low barrier of entry, right? It can be online course and you're certified, or it can be a weekend course and you're certified. Obviously, some are robust now and you can spend 2 weeks and be certified. So because it's a low barrier of entry, there's also a level of low foresight, low depth perception. So what is success by definition of a personal trainer? It's like I go from not being certified and no clients to being certified and have a busy book of business. And that's it, right? Like that's as, as deep as it possibly can get potentially, because there is no long-term approach. You're just going to keep up with attrition for year over year until you feel like I need to do something else, or I make a smarter investment, or this is what I'm going to do until I'm 60 or 70. But unlike other career fields, there's a growth pattern to it. There's like, hey, this is how you go from this level to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And the one thing that we can take away from, let's call it corporate, is that as you move up the ranks, you're solving bigger problems, right? Whether you started off as an associate, somewhere, and then you're, a VP, and then you're a president, like the problems, the workload, those things become more, right? And the details become more nuanced, and you have more people that are reporting to you. Fitness doesn't have that. Fitness is like, can you train?
Right.
Can you show up 6 to 7, 7 to 8, and take these people and facilitate workouts and make them sweaty? Can you program? Sure, great. Like that's like the next level, right? Programming for people, weight loss, getting people out of pain. Those are problems to solve. But like, again, how long do you plan on staying in that game? So there comes a level of like, what doesn't exist in my belief, or which I haven't seen at least at scale, is like, how do we get professionals to see the realm of what they're doing for long term? Now, that means, can a trainer be a trainer on the ground for 5-10 years, develop their skill set, but then talk to businesses, talk to other companies, solve bigger issues where they're sitting on panels and being on boards because they've started to move through the ranks? And I believe like that is what we should be doing with fitness, right? Creating this nuance where, hey, you just can't exist anymore because we are so important. I see some of the people that you see more than you ever see them. 4 times a week, 5 times a week, right? I can have a big impact, big influence on them,
Yeah.
right? So we are the bridge for healthcare.